Hello, everyone. Thanks for listening to Vitamae podcast. I'm happy to recommend using Anchor.fm as my podcast tool. It's a free tool. It automatically publishes your podcast to Spotify. You may manually submit your podcast to Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, Castbox.fm, and others. It is straightforward to use from your mobile phone application or computer and laptop browser. You can invite friends and record when ready and more. You may also monetize by recording guided ads that you select per episode. Join in on the fun of sharing your experiences and stories and download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Again, that's anchor.fm. Thank you.
Welcome to Vitamae. Let's talk about automation. I know you have been hearing this quite a bit more now lately, especially with the advancement of technology, but what does that really mean? I'll give you an explanation in a dictionary. Automation definition is the technique of making an apparatus, a process, or a system operate automatically. Automation is applying technology, programs, robotics, or processes to achieve outcomes with minimum human input. Another definition that you need to understand, programming. It is the process of activity of writing computer programs. So a lot of this may sound very confusing, but really what it boils down to is the outcome. What are we trying to achieve? Why are we automating? And it doesn't mean you need to only know programming language such as Python, C++, JavaScript, HTML, CSS, and many, many more. There are plenty of many programming languages out there. Go is another one from Google, and it can be overwhelming because it's not that easy. It's just like learning another language like Spanish, Russian, German, anything, right? It takes time, it takes practice. It's an everyday process. It's not something we easily absorb. But what people underestimate is that there are tools out there that you can use to automate your work. You already use it every day. For example, the Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, those things already have built-in tools. They call it macros. They may even call it plugins. You can even connect other applications from other vendors. For example, you can connect cloud storage nowadays. For example, Dropbox, Box, Google Drive, you name it. So anything that makes it easier for you to access tools, to store it, to manipulate data so you can create trending is an automation process. Lately, I've been using Microsoft Power Automate. The reason why I've been using it is because we use OneDrive as a tool set. And many of you already are familiar with OneDrive, Office 365. You have your emails going through that route. You're also getting your online access for word processing tools. Power Automate leverages the existing Microsoft suite. And then the best part, it integrates with over 260 different connections, meaning you can plug into tools like Box, Drive. You can also Dropbox or even collaboration tools, right? You can even use, for example, Microsoft Teams for chat or storing conversations or pushing conversations there. We also use WebEx Teams or WebEx apps. That's a collaboration tool. You can push messages depending on, for example, receiving an email from an originator that sent it to you based on a subject header. So if you're trying to automate, for example, even storing a file into a specific folder in OneDrive and you want to notify certain groups or individuals that a file has been dropped in, you can use Microsoft Power Automate for that. I'll give you an example. I run reports. It's much easier for me to just send notification to a space or channel by folder and by category. So you can set those. Think of it as workflows. And don't forget Excel. Excel itself has many built-in tools. For example, using formulas. Some of you are familiar with pivot tables, but you can run summations. You can find missing or true variables in different columns or spaces. I like to use index lookup. For that one, I've been using it for comparing columns from different sheets into a workbook. I've leveraged it to create summations or even to just count, right? Don't try to do things manually. So what I would recommend is if you're using any tool, Google it, research it, see if there's a more expedient way to sort, manipulate, grade data, create graphics for you. And it's not limited to just those tools. every different application out there already has some type of automation that they allow. I'll give you an example. There is such a thing as what they call API integration. So many vendors are using tools like this to try to connect to different vendors. So I'll explain. API means application programming interface. At some point, larger companies are actually building these so that you can make custom reports or custom integrations. For example, another tool that I've used in the past for project management, it was called Teamwork. I was able to use an API, meaning I could connect, I could authenticate securely, and I could pull certain information so that I could add projects in bulk. I was actually able to use that using Python programming. That programming language is actually very friendly to new beginners. There's many resources out there that you can sign up for, whether it's EDX, you can use Coursera, you can do Udemy. So there are plenty of one, or go right to even WW3 or W3C. That's an actual website where they break it down from step by step introduction. They give you a sample code that you can practice, whether in your environment or somewhere else. I actually used to use, I learned Juniper Notebook. That's one of the tools that they have where you can do line by line and it shows you the output of a command or example. So there's another book that I can recommend, but I would say pick and choose what type of language you want to try out. Start with one, and then once you develop one, or at least get a good fundamentals on one language, then you can pick up things. The reason why I say it's multiple, when you're creating web applications, for example, it's not just the back-end coding that you need to know. You need to understand the front end of it, meaning the GUI interfaces, what you see, how to massage data correctly to the correct format. For example, is it something that is formatted correct for date? Is the user inputting something correctly? Is it uppercase, lowercase? How do you want to scrub the data so that when that data is received, it's submitted and stored in a database? What database are you using? That's kind of like the back end piece, right? There's also a middle piece. How do you connect the front end that stores the information, authenticates you, for example, as a user when you're going into a website for transaction, for example, your banks? The front end is important for security, so don't forget that when you're coding. There are best practice standards. PEP 8 is an example for Python, so the different languages have standards. It's not just create a code without any guidance, right? There are, if you want to be a respected programmer, you need to know those standards. There's a lot more, you could say, methodologies that you need to learn. DevOps is going to come across if you're starting to delve into programming. But the main pieces is there are tools out there. As a user, especially a business user, you don't need to be a programmer necessarily to code, but you can help create use cases. So many of the ones that I've helped and at least taught from the introduction of it. I'm an evangelist, though I'm not an expert in coding. I know enough for sure to get started with some help. I use example codes. I can look and research and apply some of those programming languages to what I need for work. And many of people that don't know me, I'm very efficient in many things, not just programming. That's how I get the job done. A good example is Microsoft Cortana. So if you use email and if you turn that on, it actually helps you create focus time for you. Many of you have said, hey, I don't have enough time for this. I'm busy with emails. There's too many calls, too many meetings. Well, Microsoft Cortana is a form of automation. It tries to help. It searches your calendar, your email, and it tries to give you guidance and say, hey, do you need to follow this up? Is this something that you need to add to your to-do list? Right? So those are forms of automation. I've used that frankly because it actually helped me find documents that I haven't followed up. It's very useful. So if you haven't used Microsoft Cortana, I could not recommend it enough. There are other tools that have similar functions like that. I would use it. Another example is Microsoft Booking. That's actually a built-in tool that you can set up a landing page where you can have external users look at your bookings and schedule an appointment based on conversation. You can set 30 minutes, 1 hour by discussion and have multiple members in a calendar that they can schedule an appointment with you. And the nice thing is it can send an invitation to both the one that created the event and booked it for you, and also an invitation in your calendar. It creates a calendar invite on your side, and once you review it and you're actually good to commit to that appointment, you can push or share that calendar with a meeting invitation included. So it's a nice way to automate your work. You don't need to be sending text messages or emailing back and forth. Efficiency is about making it easy for others to do what you need to do, whether it's scheduling, conversations, collaborating on work. Another example that I like using is Calendly. I actually subscribe to it. I use it especially for a lot of my women empowerment projects out there. It's so much easier to have an app or application that allows the person to just book, set up a meeting appointment upfront, sends you a notification. You can reschedule, cancel it, even adds a topic. You can set the fee, whether free or charged. So it's nice to have those kind of automation tools. So again, you don't need to be a programmer to be able to automate and be efficient in your life. Find tool sets already built in, read about it, and use it to your advantage. That's part of efficiency. This way you have life balance, right? We always say there's not enough time a day to do any of your work, especially when you're learning something new. You want to reserve, you wish you had 24 hours. I always say that often because I do work on many projects, especially creative ones. But my goal is to be efficient in general and be accurate as possible and have a great way to move throughout your day so that you have space to think, to be creative, to be strategic. The goal is do things as efficiently as possible so you can have the time to be strategic. When you need to do other projects, you have more time to do the ones that you can automate. So automate what's mundane. That's your goal. Integrate things, for example. I mean, you've heard of Amazon Alexa. Most people are familiar with that. It helps you with appointments, even reordering your items for home or anything else that you want to do recurring. So that's what automation does. Same thing for your mobile devices. I'm not going to say the name now because you might accidentally respond, but your mobile iPhone or Android has that friendly hands-free type tool. That's a form of automation, right? And it could be subtle even. For example, watching a movie. You see captions, right? So that it helps not only for the ones for accessibility, where the ones that can't hear that well, but you can see it. I look at caption as a form of automation. For me, this is nice because it helps not have to have the volume so high, especially if you're watching it late at night or you just don't want to have it that loud. I use it especially for watching movies like anime. I wish I knew Japanese, but I don't yet. I'd use captions to read and understand different languages and different movies. So those are great ways to appreciate automation and the value of it. Another one that I do like is combining tools, for example. So I found a tool called Restream.io that helps broadcast live recordings, especially from Zoom or other meeting out there. I do a lot of workshops, and we wanted to stream in multiple places, not just in one platform, for example, Facebook Live, right? So Restream.io, if you have the free version, you can do up to 2 channels. You could do Facebook, you could do YouTube live streaming. If you want more channels like Twitch or others so that you could broadcast in multiple places, then you can purchase the next upgraded option for, like, for example, Twitch, right? So that means that's a tool that you can automate by pushing media wherever you want. So that's the goal. Try to incorporate tools that can do things at the same time for you so you don't have to do manual work. That's what automation means. Another example that I can give you, Canva.com, Canva.com. That's used typically for branding, creating Facebook, you could say stories, anything that you want to post for LinkedIn, for example, or Twitter at the same time. What I like about Canva, you can set a schedule where you could post things in Facebook and also on LinkedIn and anywhere else for that matter that it integrates with, and they're constantly adding additional vendors on top of that. You can set the schedule so that you can create, for example, a quote that you want to share. You don't need to manually do that at different times. You can set a schedule. Now, if you're hosting websites, for example, let's say Blogger or really WordPress or anything like that, if you're familiar with blogging, you can set schedule for that as well, right? Instead of posting publishly now, you can set a schedule to publish it at different times. So you could be working on blogs for, let's say, for example, during the weekend, you had a series and you were able to spend some quality time to just create different blog pages, and you don't want to just post it all at once because you want to create content that can be spread, let's say, throughout the month, if not monthly. You can set a schedule posting at in different times. So all the tools that we have different customizations for automating things. Another great example for Word, we've had to deal with developing templates for our documents for Word, and it's not just for that, right? You can actually incorporate using Visual Basic and tie in your Excel or Visual Basic information and have it link to your Word document so it can generate Word documents. So for example, you might want the Excel to collect all the data, especially very technical information. Have that as a collector where it stores different tables. You reference that name uniquely, and then you have columns and rows that have certain data you want to paste or at least automatically generate into a Word document. In the Word document, you probably didn't know this, there are bookmark links that can be referenced so that you can create links in the Word document that can be pasted in, and you can have that work together. So learn more about the integrations between word processor. Many of us spend a lot of time in Excel, and that's why I keep calling out Excel. We collect information from many things. It's not just for accounting. A lot of this is for collecting user information. You're collecting data that you are relevant to creating documents. So find efficient ways to do that. Python has many modules, for example, that help with generating documents even. There's modules. When I say modules for Python, I'm more familiar with Python, so I keep saying it. Think of it as short, already created code, so you don't have to create from scratch. And that's the beauty about reusing code. They have modules or packages. That's the goal. You get familiar with reusing something and modifying it to your need. So just remember that modules or packages are examples of built-in codes that somebody else took the time to be able to use, tested it repeatedly, and has functioned. So you'll learn more as you go when it comes to programming. So I won't extend this too long. I just wanted to give people some insight on what automation means. And don't forget bots. You probably heard of that also. Bots are little short programs that you've seen that are friendly helpers in the websites. They pop up the chats. They have a pre-configured response or question that they have you choose. And then you respond, and they sometimes give you knowledge base or existing forums that already have an answer, but then they give you the option to chat with a live person. So those are bots, like messenger bots, for example, on Facebook. It could be on Instagram. It could be in any social media type basically platforms, right? So those are bots, and bots are not limited to just social media. There are small ones that can be created really with many different applications out there. It just takes some time to code, and somebody might have already created it. But I'm going to caveat this. Just make sure that if you're using code, make sure it's as best practice as possible and it's secure, right? Nothing worse than having to use a code and you don't understand it, and now you create a vulnerability. You were trying to be efficient, but instead you create a vulnerability for your IT administrator to deal with. So just make sure that when you're creating this, knowledge is power. All right, so if you get deeper in programming, understand security vulnerabilities. Make sure that you're not just opening ports out there. You're not putting your credentials up in GitHub or any type of repository for it to be exposed. It's happened in the past, right? So I'm going to repeat again. If you're coding, please make sure you know how to hide those. Git ignore is an example. If you're using GitHub or GitLab, you can ignore certain files or make it separate, a different folder, and preferably prompt the user to enter a password. Do not save, do not cache, right? So just be careful when you're getting into coding. Test, and you get to test again. Make sure you know the outcome. So if you're not a programmer, you can always help by creating use cases, right? If you have somebody that's very interested in developing things, please share. Somebody that likes to code or likes to tinker, especially if somebody is that likes technology, loves to create solutions. So if you know somebody, especially at work, that has the capabilities to program or create something for you because you can't do it, you can always give ideas. So you're not limited to being a programmer. We do need use cases. We need users. We need users that can test, that are willing to participate in the process. So I welcome you And I hope that this podcast has encouraged you to learn more about automation and see how more relatable it is. It's not an alien concept. It's not something that has to be complex. It can be if developed that way, but the main message is you are part of the development process for automation. We need users to share the use cases, the issues they're having, what we can solve creatively. And the more of us that do this, the better our lives are at work and really any environment. There's awesome potential out there when it comes to automation in general. I'm not going to give you the rest of the terms because it can get overwhelming. Keep reading about it, tinker if you can, and I invite you to learn about it. So this is the key takeaway. Learn, share, have fun, collaborate, cooperate, and enjoy and appreciate the value of automation. It will help you in many things in life. So thank you again. Talk to you in the next episode.